The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace courtyard as Prince Junior made his way to the West Wing for his daily routine. At 23, he had developed a habit of walking through different sections of the palace grounds, something his father encouraged to help him understand the workings of their kingdom. Unlike many royals who remained distant from palace staff, Junior believed in knowing the people who served his family. As he rounded the corner near the servants' quarters, he noticed something unusual. Guard Thomas, a man in his late 50s who had served the royal family for over 2 decades, was struggling with a heavy wooden crate. The guard's face was flushed red, and sweat dripped from his forehead despite the cool morning air. His uniform, usually pristine, showed dark patches of perspiration. Prince Junior slowed his pace, observing the situation carefully. Thomas was attempting to move what appeared to be supplies for the upcoming state dinner, but the crate seemed far too heavy for one person to handle safely. The guard's breathing was labored, and he kept pausing to wipe his brow. What struck the prince most was that Thomas was clearly struggling alone, when such tasks typically involved multiple staff members. The prince had known Thomas since childhood. The guard had been present during many important moments in Junior's life, always standing at attention with quiet dignity. Thomas had 3 children, and had worked tirelessly to provide for his family while serving the crown with unwavering loyalty. Seeing him in distress stirred something deep within the young prince. Junior approached slowly, not wanting to startle the older man or cause embarrassment. Palace protocol dictated certain formalities between royalty and staff, but the prince had always believed that respect and kindness transcended such boundaries. As he drew closer, he could see that Thomas was not just struggling physically but appeared to be fighting back tears of frustration. The guard suddenly noticed the prince's presence and immediately straightened up, attempting to compose himself despite his obvious exhaustion. He bowed slightly, his breathing still heavy from the exertion. The crate sat between them like a symbol of the challenges that working people faced daily, challenges that often went unnoticed by those in positions of privilege and power. Prince Junior studied the scene before him, understanding that this moment represented something larger than just one man's struggle with a heavy load. This was about dignity, about the value of every person who contributed to their kingdom, and about the responsibility that came with his privileged position. The decision he would make in the next few moments would reflect not just his character, but his understanding of true leadership. The palace buzzed with its usual morning activity around them, but in this small corner of the courtyard time seemed suspended. Thomas waited respectfully for the prince to speak, while Junior considered not just what to say but what kind of leader he wanted to become. The weight of this realization felt heavier than any crown he might one day wear. This encounter would become a defining moment for the young prince, teaching him that real authority comes not from commanding others, but from understanding their struggles and responding with both wisdom and compassion. The morning sun continued to climb higher, but the lesson unfolding in the courtyard would last far longer than any single day. Prince Junior stepped forward with genuine concern etched across his features. Thomas immediately began to protest, insisting he could manage the task alone, but his trembling hands and unsteady breathing told a different story. The prince raised a gentle hand to stop the guard's protests, his voice carrying warmth rather than authority. "Thomas, how long have you been working this morning?" the prince asked, genuinely interested in understanding the full situation. The guard hesitated, clearly uncomfortable discussing his workload with royalty, but something in the prince's tone encouraged honesty. Thomas admitted he had begun his duties before dawn, helping to prepare for the state dinner, while also maintaining his regular security responsibilities. The prince learned that due to recent staff shortages, Thomas had been covering additional duties without complaint. Several younger guards had fallen ill with a seasonal flu that was making its way through the staff quarters, leaving the remaining security team stretched thin. Thomas, being one of the most experienced and reliable guards, had volunteered to take on extra responsibilities rather than see important tasks left undone. What truly moved Prince Junior was discovering that Thomas had been doing this additional work without any expectation of extra compensation. His motivation was purely his dedication to the royal family and his pride in maintaining the palace's standards. The guard explained that the crate contained special decorative items needed for the evening's dinner, pieces that required careful handling and could not be left unattended. The prince found himself deeply impressed by Thomas's work ethic, but also troubled by the system that allowed such a situation to develop. Here was a man who had served faithfully for decades, now pushing his aging body beyond reasonable limits out of pure loyalty. It was a stark reminder of the gap between those who served and those who were served. As they talked, other staff members passed by, and Prince Jr. noticed how they glanced nervously at the scene. It was unusual for royalty to engage in extended conversation with working staff, and there was clearly some anxiety about whether Thomas might be in some kind of trouble. The prince realized that his next actions would send a message not just to Thomas but to everyone watching. Prince Jr. made a decision that surprised everyone present. Instead of simply calling for additional help, he removed his formal jacket and set it carefully aside. Rolling up his sleeves, he positioned himself at one end of the heavy crate. Thomas's eyes widened in shock and he immediately began to object. But the prince's determined expression made it clear that his mind was made up. "Thomas, you've been carrying heavy loads for this family for 20 years, the prince said with a smile. Today, let me help carry yours." The simple statement carried profound meaning that resonated far beyond the immediate situation. It acknowledged not just the physical burden before them, but the years of dedication and service that Thomas had provided. The guard's initial resistance melted away, replaced by something that looked very much like gratitude mixed with disbelief. Never in his years of service had he experienced such a gesture from a member of the royal family. The moment represented a bridge being built between two worlds that rarely intersected so directly and meaningfully. Word of what was happening began to spread quietly among the nearby staff members. Kitchen workers paused in their preparations, and maintenance crew members stopped their tasks to witness something unprecedented. The young prince, heir to the throne, was about to engage in physical labor alongside a palace guard, treating him not as a servant, but as a partner in completing an important task. Together, Prince Jr. and Thomas lifted the heavy crate, and immediately the difference was remarkable. What had been an impossible burden for one man became manageable work for two. As they carried the crate toward its destination, they moved in synchronized steps, the prince matching Thomas's pace perfectly. The physical cooperation created an unexpected harmony between them. During their walk, Thomas began to relax, and conversation flowed more naturally. He shared stories about his children, his youngest daughter who was studying to become a teacher, and his son who worked as a carpenter in the village. Prince Jr. listened intently, genuinely interested in the life of this man, who had been a constant presence in the palace but whose personal story he had never truly known. The prince discovered that Thomas had been supporting not just his own family, but also caring for his elderly mother who lived in a small cottage on the palace grounds. The guard's dedication extended far beyond his official duties, encompassing a network of people who depended on his steady income and reliable character. This revelation deepened the prince's respect for the man walking beside him. As they approached the banquet hall, other staff members gathered to help with the final placement of the decorative items. What struck everyone was how naturally the prince worked alongside them, asking questions about the setup and showing genuine appreciation for the skill and attention to detail that went into preparing for state functions. His presence transformed what was typically routine work into something that felt meaningful and valued. The head butler, arriving to oversee the preparations, initially appeared flustered at finding the prince engaged in manual labor. However, Prince Jr.'s calm demeanor and obvious satisfaction with helping soon put everyone at ease. The prince made it clear that he was there by choice and was learning valuable lessons about the operations of his future kingdom. When the task was completed, Thomas thanked the prince with emotion that was difficult to hide, but Prince Jr. surprised him again by expressing his own gratitude. He thanked Thomas for allowing him to help, for his years of dedicated service, and for the lesson in perseverance and dignity that he had witnessed that morning. The exchange of thanks created a moment of mutual respect that transcended their different stations in life. The prince then did something that would become the talk of the palace for weeks to come. He asked Thomas to join him for tea in one of the smaller reception rooms, a space typically reserved for meetings between royalty and visiting dignitaries. The invitation was extended with such genuine warmth that Thomas, despite his initial protests about propriety, found himself accepting. Over tea, Prince Jr. learned about the challenges facing the palace staff, the pride they took in their work, and the small struggles that rarely came to the attention of the royal family. Thomas spoke about the difficulty of maintaining high standards while dealing with staff shortages, budget constraints, and the physical demands of palace life. The conversation opened the prince's eyes to aspects of palace operations he had never considered. The prince also shared his own thoughts about leadership and his hopes for the future of the kingdom. He spoke about wanting to be a ruler who understood the real lives of his people, not just the formal reports and statistics presented in official briefings. Thomas found himself offering insights and perspectives that came from decades of observation and experience within the palace walls. Their conversation was interrupted by a gentle knock at the door. The head of palace staff had arrived, having heard about the unusual circumstances of the morning. Rather than appearing concerned or disapproving, he seemed curious and pleased to see the prince engaging so directly with the people who made the palace function smoothly, day after day. News of the prince's actions spread throughout the palace with remarkable speed. Kitchen staff whispered excitedly while preparing lunch. Groundskeepers shared the story during their break, and even the stable hands heard about how Prince Jr. had rolled up his sleeves to help guard Thomas. Each telling of the story seemed to add warmth and hope to the daily routines of people who rarely experience such direct acknowledgement from the royal family. The head of palace staff, Sir Edmund, had served 3 generations of royalty and had never witnessed anything quite like what had occurred that morning. He found himself both surprised and impressed by the young prince's instinctive response to Thomas's situation. As someone responsible for managing hundreds of employees, Sir Edmund understood the profound impact that such gestures could have on morale and loyalty throughout the entire organization. Prince Jr. spent the afternoon reflecting on his morning experience while attending to his regular duties. During his tutoring session on constitutional law, he found his mind wandering to thoughts about the practical implementation of leadership principles. His tutor noticed the prince's distraction but was pleased when Junior began asking questions about the responsibilities of rulers toward their subjects and the importance of understanding different perspectives within society. Meanwhile, Thomas returned to his duties with renewed energy and purpose. His fellow guards noticed the change in his demeanor immediately. Where there had been signs of stress and fatigue earlier, there was now a sense of pride and validation. Thomas shared the story of his morning with his closest colleagues, emphasizing not just the prince's helpfulness, but his genuine interest in understanding the challenges faced by palace staff. The ripple effects of the morning's events continued to spread. Other staff members began approaching Thomas with questions about his interaction with the prince. Many were curious about whether this represented a change in how the royal family might engage with employees. Thomas, wise from his years of experience, cautioned against expecting too much, but he couldn't hide his own optimism about what the future might hold under Prince Jr.'s eventual leadership. In the late afternoon, Prince Jr. made an unexpected decision. He asked Sir Edmund to arrange a meeting with the heads of all palace departments. The request was unusual, as such meetings typically occurred only during times of crisis or major policy changes. However, Sir Edmund recognized the sincere intent behind the prince's request and began making the necessary arrangements for the following day. That evening, as the state dinner proceeded with its usual elegance and protocol, Prince Jr. found himself viewing the event through different eyes. He watched the servers moving gracefully between tables, observed the security guards stationed discreetly around the room, and noticed the countless details that contributed to the evening's success. Each element represented the work and dedication of individuals like Thomas, people whose contributions made possible the grandeur that guests experienced. During a quiet moment between courses, the prince caught sight of Thomas at his security post near the main entrance. Their eyes met briefly, and Thomas offered a respectful nod that conveyed both professional acknowledgement and personal gratitude. The prince responded with a subtle smile that communicated his continued respect for the guard's service and dignity. As the evening progressed, several foreign dignitaries complimented the king on the exceptional quality of the palace staff and the flawless execution of the dinner. The king, pleased by these comments, made a mental note to ensure that such praise was passed along to the staff members responsible. He had no idea that his son had spent the morning gaining first-hand appreciation for the work that made such compliments possible. The night concluded with the prince feeling a deep sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with the diplomatic success of the dinner. Instead, his contentment came from the knowledge that he had begun to bridge a gap between his privileged position and the real experiences of the people who would one day be his subjects. The lesson learned from helping Thomas carry a heavy load was proving to have implications far beyond that single act of assistance. The next morning arrived with an air of anticipation throughout the palace. Word had spread about Prince Junior's requested meeting with department heads, and there was considerable speculation about the purpose behind this unusual gathering. Sir Edmund had arranged for the meeting to take place in the palace's smaller conference room, a space that felt more intimate and conducive to open discussion than the formal throne room or grand council chamber. Prince Junior arrived early, having spent considerable time preparing for this conversation. He had reviewed reports about palace operations, staff concerns, and budget allocations, but more importantly, he had thought deeply about how to approach the discussion in a way that would encourage honest communication. He understood that his position could intimidate people into telling him only what they thought he wanted to hear. As the department heads filed into the room, Prince Junior greeted each one personally. He spoke with the head of housekeeping about the challenges of maintaining such a large facility, asked the chief of security about staffing levels and training needs, and inquired with the kitchen supervisor about the logistics of feeding both royal family members and staff. These brief conversations helped establish a tone of genuine interest rather than formal obligation. The meeting began with Prince Junior sharing his experience from the previous morning, though he was careful to present it as a learning opportunity rather than criticism of existing systems. He spoke about his realization that he needed to better understand the daily realities faced by palace employees if he hoped to be an effective leader in the future. His honesty and humility surprised many of the department heads, who had expected a more traditional, top-down style of communication. The head of maintenance, Mrs. Catherine, was the first to respond with specifics about the challenges her department faced. She spoke about aging infrastructure, the difficulty of completing repairs without disrupting palace functions, and the dedication of workers who often stayed late to finish projects. Her comments opened the door for others to share similar stories about their departments and the people who worked within them. What emerged from the discussion was a comprehensive picture of palace life that differed significantly from the formal reports typically presented to the royal family. Prince Junior learned about the janitor who had developed an innovative system for cleaning delicate artworks, the gardener who had created drought-resistant landscapes that saved money while maintaining beauty, and the security officer who had identified potential safety improvements that could benefit both staff and residents. The kitchen supervisor shared the story of how staff members had been covering for sick colleagues without complaint, often working double shifts to ensure that meal service never suffered. The head of communications spoke about employees who had suggested improvements to palace tour operations that had increased both visitor satisfaction and revenue. Each story highlighted the intelligence, creativity, and dedication of people whose contributions had previously gone unrecognized at the leadership level. Prince Junior took careful notes throughout the meeting, but more importantly, he asked thoughtful questions that demonstrated his genuine engagement with the issues being discussed. When the head of palace security mentioned concerns about Thomas taking on too many responsibilities, the prince nodded knowingly and asked what could be done to better distribute workloads and support veteran employees. The conversation gradually shifted from identifying problems to exploring solutions. Prince Junior encouraged the department heads to think creatively about ways to improve working conditions, recognize outstanding contributions, and create systems that would support employee well-being. He made it clear that he was interested in practical changes that could be implemented, not just theoretical discussions about ideal situations. As the meeting drew to a close, the prince made a commitment that surprised everyone present. He announced his intention to spend time working alongside staff members in different departments over the coming months. This wouldn't be ceremonial visits or formal inspections, but actual hands-on experience that would help him understand the reality of palace operations from multiple perspectives. The department heads left the meeting with a sense of hope and excitement that had been absent from palace operations for many years. In the weeks that followed, Prince Junior's commitment to understanding palace operations transformed from words into action. True to his promise, he began spending time in different departments, working alongside staff members and learning about their daily responsibilities. His first assignment was in the palace gardens, where he spent 3 days helping with seasonal plantings and maintenance work under the guidance of the head gardener. The experience proved more challenging than the prince had anticipated. The physical demands of garden work, combined with the technical knowledge required to properly care for the diverse plant collections, gave him deep appreciation for the skill and dedication of the groundskeeping staff. He returned each evening tired but energized by the satisfaction of productive physical labor and the camaraderie he had experienced with the garden crew. His next rotation took him to the palace kitchens during the busy preparation period for a major diplomatic reception. Working alongside experienced cooks and servers, Prince Jr. gained insight into the precise timing, coordination, and attention to detail required to execute complex meal service. The kitchen staff, initially nervous about having royalty in their workspace, soon found themselves enjoying the prince's willingness to take on any task, from chopping vegetables to washing dishes. Throughout these experiences, Prince Jr. made a point of learning not just about the work itself, but about the people performing it. He discovered that many staff members had hidden talents and interests beyond their palace duties. The assistant gardener was also a talented musician who performed at local festivals. One of the kitchen workers was studying accounting in her spare time, hoping to eventually move into palace administration. These personal connections enriched the prince's understanding of the full human beings behind each job title. Guard Thomas, who had become something of an informal mentor to the prince, watched these developments with quiet satisfaction. During their occasional conversations, he shared insights gained from his years of observing palace life and offered practical advice about leadership that couldn't be found in any textbook. The relationship that had begun with helping carry a heavy crate had evolved into a friendship based on mutual respect and shared values. The impact of Prince Jr.'s initiative extended far beyond his personal education. Staff members throughout the palace began to feel more valued and visible. Knowing that their work might be observed and appreciated by future royalty motivated many employees to take even greater pride in their contributions. Department heads reported improved morale, increased cooperation between different areas, and a general sense of optimism about the future direction of palace operations. However, not everyone within the broader palace community viewed these changes positively. Some traditionalists among the nobility questioned whether it was appropriate for a prince to engage in manual labor or spend extensive time with staff members. There were whispered concerns about the maintenance of proper hierarchy and the precedent being set for future royal behavior. These criticisms occasionally reached Prince Jr.'s ears, but he remained committed to his path. The king, initially uncertain about his son's unconventional approach, gradually became supportive as he observed the positive effects on palace operations and staff satisfaction. During one of their regular private meetings, Prince Jr. shared stories from his various work experiences and explained how these interactions were shaping his understanding of effective leadership. The king found himself impressed by his son's insights and growing wisdom. A turning point came when Prince Jr. was working in the palace archives, helping to organize historical documents. During this assignment, he discovered correspondence from previous generations of royalty that revealed a rich tradition of engagement between rulers and their subjects. These historical examples provided validation for his modern approach and demonstrated that meaningful connection between leadership and citizens had deep roots in their kingdom's heritage. Word of the prince's activities spread beyond the palace walls. Citizens throughout the kingdom began to take notice. Stories circulated about the future king who worked alongside palace staff, who understood the challenges of daily labor, and who seemed genuinely interested in the lives of ordinary people. This growing reputation created anticipation about what kind of ruler Prince Jr. might become, and how his approach might differ from traditional royal leadership styles. 6 months after that transformative morning in the courtyard, the palace had undergone subtle but significant changes. Prince Jr.'s initiative had evolved into a formal program called the Royal Understanding Project, which created regular opportunities for future leaders to gain practical experience in various aspects of kingdom operations. The program attracted attention from other royal families and government leaders who were interested in innovative approaches to leadership development. Guard Thomas found himself in an unexpected new role as an advisor to the Prince on matters relating to staff welfare and operational efficiency. His decades of experience and natural wisdom made him an invaluable resource for understanding how policies and decisions affected the daily lives of palace employees. The promotion came with increased responsibilities and compensation, allowing Thomas to better support his family while contributing his expertise to meaningful change. The relationship between Prince Jr. and Thomas had become a symbol throughout the palace of what was possible when barriers between different levels of society were thoughtfully reduced. Their friendship demonstrated that respect and mutual learning could flourish across traditional boundaries without undermining necessary structures of authority and responsibility. Other staff members found themselves more willing to share ideas and concerns with management, knowing that their perspectives would be valued and considered. The changes extended beyond the palace walls as Prince Jr. began applying lessons learned from his staff interactions to his broader royal duties. During visits to schools, hospitals, and community organizations throughout the kingdom, he approached conversations with citizens differently, asking detailed questions about their experiences and challenges rather than limiting himself to formal ceremonial interactions. These authentic engagements created stronger connections between the royal family and the people they served. The ripple effects of that morning's encounter continued to spread in unexpected ways. Several palace staff members, inspired by the recognition and respect they had experienced, pursued additional education and training opportunities. The kingdom established scholarship programs to support employees who wanted to develop new skills, and many staff members moved into positions of greater responsibility within palace administration or branched out into successful careers in the broader community. Prince Jr.'s reputation as a leader who understood working people began to attract talented individuals to palace service who might not have considered such positions under traditional royal management. The quality of applications for palace positions improved significantly, and staff turnover decreased as employees felt more valued and engaged in their work. The combination of improved morale and higher quality personnel enhanced the overall effectiveness of palace operations. As Prince Jr.'s formal education in statecraft continued, his tutors noticed how his practical experiences informed his understanding of governance principles. His questions in political science classes reflected real-world awareness of how policies affected different groups of citizens. His essays on economics included insights gained from observing budget constraints and resource management at the operational level. The integration of theoretical knowledge with practical experience created a more complete foundation for future leadership. The transformation that began with helping Thomas carry a heavy crate had become something much larger and more significant. It represented a new model of leadership development that emphasized empathy, understanding, and genuine connection with citizens across all levels of society. The approach challenged traditional assumptions about the distance that should exist between rulers and subjects while maintaining appropriate respect for institutional structures and protocols. Years later, when Prince Jr. eventually ascended to the throne, the kingdom would be known for its innovative approach to governance and the unusual closeness between its royal family and citizens. Historians would trace this transformation back to various policy decisions and formal programs, but those who lived through the change would remember that it all began with a young prince who saw a guard struggling with a heavy load and chose compassion over convention. The lesson that emerged from that simple act of helping would influence not just one kingdom, but serve as an example for leaders everywhere of how small gestures of recognition and support can transform entire organizations and communities. The story of Prince Jr. and Guard Thomas became a reminder that true leadership begins not with grand proclamations or formal authority, but with the willingness to see the humanity in every person and respond with kindness, respect, and genuine care.